Hello, my name is Emily, and I'm here today with nationally recognized authority and trust clause litigation, Dan Dalton. How are you today, Dan?
I'm doing great, Emily. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So, Dan, we get a number of calls from churches that have disaffiliated. What legal issues should they be anticipating now that they have left the denomination?
Sure, there's really five things that they should be thinking about since they've left the denomination. Unfortunately, a lot of churches have just disaffiliated without getting legal assistance, or they've relied on a like a form bank or LegalZoom or something like that to help them out. And that legal bank or forms might get them to a certain point, to maybe 50% of what's needed. But really they need to work with local counsel or any experienced attorneys like our firm to help them through the next steps, just so that they don't get caught somewhere down the road on a few issues. So these are really kind of breaks down to two things. One is governance and one is property and title. So one thing on the title thing is to make sure that when you disaffiliate, that the deed you get back to your property is to your church. So if in a number of conferences, for example, it's required that you set up a new legal entity. So if you're incorporating a new church, for example, you want to make sure that the church has been incorporated before disaffiliation. And then you want to make sure that title goes from your former church to your new church. And then there's a disclaimer of the trust clause in there. So that's, making sure that title is the name of the church is super important. I can't tell you how many times that local churches have gone through a disaffiliation process and have not checked title or done anything to title. If they don't do that, then they're going to find themselves not owning the church. And the whole point of this disaffiliation for some churches is to own their property. So making sure that title is clear and it's properly done is one point. The second point is if there's any type of leases that the church has with other entities to use their property, make sure that those leases are with the new church. So you might have had a lease with ABC, United Methodist Church. Make sure that you have a new lease with the new church, just because if you don't, that lease is no longer enforceable. So make sure that you have your lease and your title work done. So that's on the property side. Those are really two basic things that need to be done. You really need to look at that. And a lot of churches have daycares, and they also have different groups that rent the church, their property. So it's just so important to make sure that we get the title work and the lease work done. On the governance side, make sure that you properly either amend your articles or create a new entity with new articles of incorporation. Like I said before, there's some states that require you to prevent or to prepare new articles of incorporation and create a new entity, like Arkansas. So before you disaffiliate, make sure that you have that new entity created under Arkansas law. Each state is unique. You cannot use a form for Florida to create an Arkansas corporation. You can't use a form from Colorado to create a California corporation. Make sure you're working with somebody who knows how to incorporate in that state to make sure that it's properly formed. The articles of incorporation, the words that are in there and the format of that is peculiar to each state. So make sure that's done correctly. Other states say that they don't want you, other conferences, I should say they don't want you to create a new entity. So you need to amend your articles of incorporation to do so. So like in Oklahoma, for example, you would simply amend it from ABC United Methodist Church to ABC Church or whatever church you want to call yourself. But you want to make sure that that amendment is done and it's recorded with the Secretary of State's office and that you're good to go. So that's just really critical to have that amendment done properly. So your articles of incorporation on the governance side. The second thing is your bylaws. Make sure that you have bylaws prepared. Again, there's different formats, and again, I would never ever use a form. You might have, you're just sick of paying for disaffiliation or legal fees, and you don't want to pay for bylaws. I get that, but please don't borrow somebody's bylaws and do a find replace and put your name in. There's so many times where that local church has no idea what's in their bylaws, and an issue arises and then the bylaws don't support them to get out or to do something. For example, there's a number of churches that like how Methodist churches run with your administrative board, trustees, finance, and SPR committee. There's other churches that just want to have a one board model. That's kind of like what most churches, newer churches, like to do. If you're just getting a form and doing find replace and you want the one board model, but those bylaws provide for those 4 boards, administrative board and the 3 others, you're kind of stuck. And so you want to get it done right and make sure you get that done right. So you have your articles and your bylaws. The third thing is apply for 501c3 status. You probably were on the group exemption for the UMC in the past for 501c3. Now that you're disaffiliated, you're out of that. You can't use it anymore. So make sure you apply for 501c3 status. It's not that hard to do. It takes a lot of paperwork, a lot of time, and work with somebody that knows what they're doing, because the IRS will reject it if you don't do it properly. But get your tax exemption done. And the reason you want that is really for 2 reasons. One is to protect your donors, so that the donors know that the money that they're donating actually will be tax deductible. And the second thing is later you can apply for grants and other loans if you have a 501c3 in your own name. If you don't have it in your own name, it's just that much harder to do. And sometimes it's grants won't be made or loans won't be made without it. So articles, bylaws, 501c3 application, those are the 3 things on the governance side. And on the property side, your deeds and your lease. Those are the big things. After that, there's other things that'll fall into place. On an employment side, you might want to have employment contracts for your pastoral team and your lead team. You would probably going to want to have an employment handbook, to make sure that people are okay with that. Now, you probably already have one through your staff parish relations committee, but update that for the new church entity to make sure it applies to them as well. And it's always good to update your employment policies at least once a year, because laws change so frequently on this point. And again, employment contracts and handbooks are very specific to each church and very specific to each state. So whatever you do, please don't get a form and don't borrow your friend's bylaws or your handbook from one state to use it in another state. Yeah, there's just so many problems that can arise, and we see that every day. Just spend the time and the money to get it done right at the outset, then you won't have to worry about it in the future. So that's our advice, and that's kind of, we understand once disaffiliation done, you just kind of want to take a breath and be over it, but just take these final steps, because what we've seen, especially in churches that have gone through disaffiliation in the past, like in the PCUSA or the Christian Reformed or Episcopal churches go to Anglican, the churches that haven't really tied the knot, haven't gotten everything done, like we talked about earlier, those are the ones that, 3, 5, 10 years later have run into problems, legal problems, because they never finished up that whole process on title and on governance and on employment. So make sure you get that done. And of course, we're here to help you. I think you'll be in a good spot after that, and you can just worry and focus on ministry and mission at that point in time.
Well, thank you again for your insight, Dan. If your church is interested in hiring our firm to help you through the process, please reach out to our office at 313-859-6000 or email us today. Thank you.